Book 2 is called Telemachus Sets Sail, but before that can happen, he has a little more growing up to do first. It might make more sense to call it Telemachus Speaks Up. In the opening book of the Odyssey, we watched Telemachus struggle privately with uncertainty and frustration, and his sense that something was terribly wrong in his home, even if he did not yet know how to change it. In Book 2, that uncertainty moves into the open. This chapter takes place almost entirely in public. Telemachus calls an assembly of the people of Ithaca. This is something that has not happened since his father Odysseus left for the Trojan War, when Telemachus was just an infant. Now he steps into a new persona. Up till now, he was the little son of King Odysseus, waiting at home with his mother for news. Now, Telemachus joins the citizenry, and he speaks out. He's a member of the community, demanding to be heard. In epic poetry, speeches are significant. Dialogue in general. We're used to having conversations all the time in real life, and we don't think much about them. But in the world of literature, and especially in epic poetry, saying something has impact. Speeches are actions. What characters say and how they say it reveals who holds power, who supports it, who resists it, and who refuses to listen. This chapter is almost entirely speeches, which is perfect for showing how words can function as action and also demonstrate character. As we read Book 2, we'll keep practicing the kind of careful reading we began in Book 1. We'll pay attention to dialogue, to repeated phrases, and to moments that seem small but turn out to matter later. For this chapter, we'll keep this question in mind. What happens when a young man who has been silent suddenly begins to speak? First, let's catalog what happens in this chapter with a chronological, factual plot summary. When Book 2 begins, Telemachus has called an assembly of the people of Ithaca. The elders gather, surprised, and Telemachus speaks publicly for the first time. He describes the suitors' behavior, how they have occupied his home, consumed his family's wealth, and dishonored his household. He asks the people of Ithaca to help stop them. The suitors respond with mockery rather than apology. One of them blames Penelope, accusing her of deception and delay. They argue that they are not at fault and refuse to leave the palace. As the argument continues, Telemachus cries out a plea to the gods to avenge him. Zeus hears him and sends an answer. 2 eagles appear in the sky, fighting violently as they fly over the assembly. An elder named 𝘊𝙏𝙗 interprets the sight as an omen. He warns that the suitors' actions will bring destruction upon them, and that Odysseus' return is near. The suitors dismiss the warning. They laugh at the omen and refuse to change their behavior. Telemachus speaks again. He announces that he will leave Ithaca to seek news of his father. He asks for a ship and a crew. Although the suitors continue to resist him, Telemachus remains firm in his decision. Athena, meanwhile, is still watching over events, in disguise as Mentor, a friend of Odysseus. She helps Telemachus prepare for his journey. Book 2 ends with the ship setting sail. Now that we have a clear sense of what happens in Book 2, we can turn to how the chapter works. The main focus of our reading here is dialogue. We'll pay attention to both what characters say, as well as how their words function as actions in the story. In everyday language, the word dialogue means a conversation between 2 people. But in literary analysis, dialogue is a broader term. The etymology helps here. Dia means through, and logos means words. What does the author achieve through words? So in literary analysis, when you hear the word dialogue, that includes monologues and soliloquies, and more formal speeches as well. In epic poetry, speeches often are the events. When characters speak in public, they're taking positions and making claims and revealing what they think about themselves, how they understand their own power. How do other characters respond to a speech? Are they on the speaker's side? Approval? Silence? Refusal to respond? These are also choices and matter just as much as the bold declarations. Remember in Book 1, we learned a little bit about the title character Odysseus, purely through his reputation. This is a related idea. What people think about the character Telemachus is on display here when you see how they respond to his speech. In Book 2, almost everything that happens unfolds through speech. Telemachus accuses the suitors openly. The suitors defend themselves and shift blame. An elder explains how he interprets a sign. Each response moves the situation forward. When we do close reading of dialogue-heavy writing, we'll pay attention to how character is revealed through language. We'll notice tone, repetition, and the kinds of words characters choose when they want to persuade, dismiss, or challenge each other. For our first close reading, we'll look at what happens in the assembly. This scene is built almost entirely out of speeches, and that makes it especially important to pay attention to language. Who speaks confidently? Who deflects? Who refuses to take responsibility? This is the kind of moment where literary analysis slows down. Instead of summarizing the speeches, we'll look closely at how they work, how certain words and phrases are used, and why. Telemachus speaks first. Notice how Homer describes him. He's often called thoughtful Telemachus. This is an example of an epithet, a short descriptive phrase that is regularly attached to a character or place. In epic poetry, you can expect to hear these same phrases again and again. Bright-eyed Athena, cunning Odysseus. It's not that Homer had a small vocabulary. He knows what he's doing. Also, this is a device used by other authors of epic sagas. That repetitive use of epithets actually serves several purposes. They help listeners keep track of characters in a long story. They reinforce important traits. And they predispose us towards a particular way of understanding the character. We expect bright-eyed Athena to be intelligent and observant. We think, surely cunning Odysseus will be able to get himself out of trouble. Here, describing Telemachus as thoughtful, or with calm good sense, or with firm resolve, prepares us to hear his speech not as reckless or impulsive, but as deliberate. When we hear those epithets, we think about how much he's grown, especially in contrast with how hesitant and unsure he was before. When he accuses the suitors of abusing his household, his words are emotional, but they're also controlled. He names the problem clearly and appeals to the community for justice. Even when he breaks down in tears, we are led to understand that this is the response of a reasonable person pushed to the brink. We see the suitors, in contrast, respond very differently. They are repeatedly described as brazen. That word signals shamelessness. And when they speak, their language confirms it. Instead of denying Telemachus' accusations, they mock him. They are disrespectful toward their elders. They refuse to acknowledge any wrongdoing, and they try to shift blame onto Penelope. Listen to how they talk about Penelope, calling her the matchless queen of cunning. From our perspective, that epithet recognizes how Penelope is finding clever ways to remain true to Odysseus. Those same words reflect the suitor's growing impatience with her. Her brilliant delay tactic, repeatedly weaving and unraveling a burial shroud for her father-in-law, is described in tones of outrage. The suitors feel like she's tricking them denying them the riches they are due. These kinds of snide comments about her using her charms and gifts reflect how they feel justified moving right into the palace like a horde of locusts. Homer doesn't just come right out and tell us who is acting honorably and who is not. He lets us hear it in the speeches themselves. The contrast between Telemachus's careful language and the suitor's dismissive and insulting tone reveals character more powerfully than any summary could. Now notice something else. The assembly does not resolve the conflict. Here's what we take away. Telemachus speaks truthfully, the elder men listen, and yet the suitors remain unmoved. Their words expose their arrogance, carelessness, and a refusal to participate in the shared meaning or responsibility. So, after reading this section of the book closely, looking at how they either speak or respond to speech, we have a better understanding of all of these characters. We also learn a surprising amount about how this society works, just by being a fly on the wall during the assembly. For instance, during these speeches, Homer shows us that authority is not inherited. It must be recognized. Telemachus doesn't automatically get treated like the next in line to inherit the palace of Ithaca and be named king. This is what we might expect from our own experience with royal families. Telemachus has to earn his place through honor and brave deeds and success, and be recognized for his achievements. Recognition depends in part in how language is used in public. Let's turn now to another moment in the assembly, one that shifts our attention from speech to signs. As the argument unfolds and Telemachus sees he isn't getting anywhere with the suitors, he basically says, "Have you no shame?" And they say, "No." Telemachus all but throws his hands up and says, "Fine, eat me out of house and home, but I call on the gods to avenge me." And what should happen? Zeus hears him and sends a response. We know that. No one else knows that. 2 eagles appear in the sky, tearing at each other as they fly over the gathering. This sudden interruption draws the attention of the crowd, and an elder named 𝙊𝙤𝙤𝙗 steps forward to explain what it means. He interprets the sight as an omen. The eagles, he warns, are a sign of violence to come. If the suitors do not change their ways, destruction will follow. This is an example of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a literary technique in which an author hints at events that will happen later in the story. Sometimes those hints are subtle. Sometimes they're explained openly, as they are here. We'll pay special attention to how people respond to the omen. 𝙊𝙤𝙤𝙗 takes the sign seriously. He connects it to the suitor's behavior and urges caution. His interpretation is authoritative, that of an expert seer. He tries to help others to understand just how serious the situation is. The suitors react very differently. They laugh at the warning. They dismiss the omen and mock the idea that it could have meaning at all. What sort of person acts this way? Through this moment, Homer invites the reader to notice a pattern. Characters who are willing to listen, interpret, and reflect tend to act with care. Characters who reject meaning and refuse to see consequences tend to repeat the same mistakes. Foreshadowing works because it prepares us as readers. We're allowed to see what some characters choose to ignore. As the story continues, we'll remember this moment. We'll be on the lookout for the event it foretells, but in the meantime, it reveals to us how different characters understand the world and how seriously they take the warning. In this chapter, we've paid close attention to speech, word choice, and signs. These details add color and richness to the story, but authors don't just use these devices for decoration. Right from the start of the Odyssey, these details are helping us understand how power and conflict take shape in the story. This kind of reading helps us see why Book 2 marks an early turning point. Telemachus may not have authority, but by speaking publicly, he has begun to claim it. By the end of Book 2, the situation in Ithaca has not been resolved. The suitors are still in the palace. Odysseus is still absent, and Telemachus has not yet gained real authority. But something important has changed. In this chapter, Telemachus moves from private frustration to public action. He speaks openly in the assembly. He names injustice. Even when he's mocked and dismissed, he does not retreat. Language has become his first tool. Through speeches, repeated descriptions, and signs that point forward, Homer shows us how character is revealed under pressure. The suitors' words confirm what their epithets suggest. 𝙊𝙤𝙮𝙗𝙗's careful interpretation contrasts with their careless dismissal. And Telemachus, still uncertain, begins to act with purpose. With his decision made, Telemachus prepares to depart Ithaca, and the journey truly begins. Book 2 teaches us that growth doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like speaking up when no one else wants to listen. Sometimes it looks like recognizing warning signs that others ignore. And sometimes it looks like choosing to leave, even when the outcome is unclear. As readers, we are now prepared to notice more than what happens next. We're ready to pay attention to how language, judgment, and response shape the story as it unfolds. Before we leave this book, it helps to pause briefly and think about how a story like the Odyssey was originally shared. Homer was not writing a book to be read silently. These stories were composed as epic poems, meant to be performed aloud, often over many hours, sometimes many days. In that kind of storytelling, repetition is not a flaw, it's a feature. While repetition feels like a mistake in a modern novel, it's to be expected in this kind of work. Epithets, those short, repeated descriptive phrases, help listeners follow a long narrative. They remind the audience who a character is, what matters about them, and how they tend to act. In a spoken story, an epithet works a bit like a name tag and a character note combined. So that's how epithets can help with memory. We also saw in our close reading how they shape interpretation. When we hear thoughtful Telemachus again and again, we're encouraged to see him as careful and reflective, even when he is unsure. When the suitors are consistently described as brazen, their behavior feels less like a series of individual mistakes and more like a settled pattern. This is relevant for literary analysis. By paying attention to repeated phrases, we recognize this is a certain style of writing, the epic saga. What's more, we know we should allow Homer to guide our judgment. The language prepares us to take some voices seriously and distrust others. Understanding this helps us read epic poetry on its own terms, rather than expecting it to sound like a modern novel. To continue this work, follow the links below to find our reader's guide for Book 2. It includes questions that return to the assembly speeches, activities that help you work with epithets, and a short writing prompt focused on foreshadowing and omens. These are designed to give you practice doing the same kind of careful reading and thinking we've modeled here. Take some time with the reader's guide, and then we'll move on to Book 3, where we'll be thinking about memory and storytelling.